All right. Everybody good to go? We're all set? All right, great. Okay, great. My name is Aaron Watson. I'm a trial attorney with the Watson Law Firm here in Pensacola, Florida. I'm joined here with my colleague, attorney Ryan Stoner, here with the Watson firm as well. We have the privilege and pleasure to represent Jordan Gray, Brandon Gray, and Matthew Gilley concerning a poisoning case that occurred on last Friday at Nikko's Japanese Steak House and Sushi Bar over in Pace, Santa Rosa County. First and foremost, I want to say this, that this case highlights the trust that we place in restaurants who serve us food. We don't get to see what all's happening for the most part in the kitchen. We don't get to see what's in the condiments and items that they use, but we place the utmost trust in our restaurants and folks who prepare food. And here it's a case that really involves a violation of that trust. For lack of a better word, my clients were poisoned. I don't know what it's like to experience a narcotic such as the ones that were involved in this case, and I don't want to know. But my clients didn't have a choice in the matter. They incurred or experienced a life-changing experience that they're going to continue to have to deal with the blowback of. And so I want to talk about what we know, but before we get into that, I want to have my colleague, attorney Ryan Stoner, just to give you some background on our clients, what they do for a living.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Yes, we represent Jordan Gray, and she is a clinic manager. Her husband, Brandon Gray, who is not with us today, he is a construction supervisor. He also teaches coaches inline speed skating. And then we have Matthew Gilley here, and he is a marine construction worker.
Okay. And with that, I want to have my client, Jordan Gray, step to the mic, just to talk about the facts of what happened on the night of this incident on last Friday around 8 p.m. at Nicos restaurant.
So on Friday night, we all decided to go out to Hibachi. It was at 8. We remember specifically because we were looking up the times, and initially the restaurant said they closed at 8 p.m. We thought we weren't going to be able to go, but we found another source that said they were closing at 10. We got up there, sat down. Everything was fairly normal other than the fact that the table we sat at had already gotten their salads and soup and everything. So we actually thought we were really lucky that we weren't going to have a significant wait or anything of that such. Everything was fairly normal at the dinner other than some comments regarding the soy sauce being a sweet soy sauce. When another couple that was at the restaurant with us had asked what the sauce was that was being used to cook the food with. After that, we had asked that we got a little bit of a lecture from the chef on how healthy soy sauce is for you, particularly that you should take it like once a day. Other than that, like I said, everything was fairly normal. We placed a to-go order to bring back home, and then we got our leftovers in takeout. It wasn't until later that evening that we realized something was wrong, and even into the next morning, none of us slept. All of us had racing hearts. It was very scary the next morning. My husband had reached out to a friend of ours who is a cop in Santa Rosa County and told him that, it was occurring to all three of us. The only common thing was that we had dinner together, so that had to be something there. We thought maybe it was our drinks that had been drugged, and I remember telling my husband, that's crazy. People don't put anything that would keep you up. That's not how you get drugged. So he called him and talked to him about it, and honestly, luckily he did, because at that point, about 30 to 45 minutes later, the officer saw the case with the other family where they had been in the hospital, same thing, everything was the same, and it was the same restaurant. So at that point, we went up there, and we got tested. They tested our They did urine tests, they did blood tests, they spoke with all of us, got our statements. We saw the 12-year-old boy who had chewed an ulcer into his lip, talked to them, and they had the same experience, just up all night, racing heart, no clue what was going on.
With regard to the drug tests that you underwent, what were the results?
So we all tested positive for methamphetamines.
As it relates to testing positive for methamphetamines, can you tell us what it's been like the past few days?
It has been honestly horrifying. Even after that, it's not just like you're up for 24 hours and then you go to sleep. It took several days for me to get a full night's sleep. Even then, I have nightmares. One of the biggest and worst concerns for me is I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old who are always with me. We don't get babysitters. They happened on a very last-minute request from my grandparents to be with them. It's something that, like I said, it rarely happens, so they just happened to be with them that night, and it's the what-ifs. What if my 5-year-old had been there? She is very petite. I don't think she would have survived that. I'm quite certain she wouldn't have, and it's been very difficult, an extreme depression. It's hard to know what you're experiencing and feeling that is because you were drugged, or what you're experiencing and feeling because that's just the new reality. Where do I take my kids to eat? Do I just cook at home from now on, having no trust to take them anywhere? I'm trying to figure out where to go from here.
Thank you, Jordan. Matthew, if you will step to the mic and after the positive findings regarding methamphetamine, what has it been like over the past few days?
It's been really rough. I lost a lot of weight to a lack of wanting to eat, a desire to not feel like I was feeling that night. I didn't drink any water for days, and ever since I've just had this overwhelming sense of depression that I've been not good enough, that my work hasn't been good, that I just haven't been successful ever since I experienced that.
Do you feel that this exposure to this narcotic has caused you any difficulties as far as processing things, or speak to that?
I move slower. I don't react as quick as I used to. I don't feel like I react the same as I used to. I've always been a happier individual. I've been uplifting at work, and I don't make the jokes I used to make. I don't talk to people like I used to. It's affected my relationships at work and at home, and it's taken a toll on me mentally, not knowing if I'll ever be back to the way I was.
Thank you. So I want to proceed with talking about the steps from here. Methamphetamine ain't supposed to be in hibachi. I said ain't supposed to be because we know that shouldn't happen, and we place the utmost trust in restaurants and folks who serve us food to make sure that it's safe to eat. We're not going to come here today to point fingers at Nicos because this is still under investigation. We know that what we know is that our clients, and not just our clients, my other client's not here today, but he also had positive findings for methamphetamine. And we know that there were 7 folks involved in this, and the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office has already issued a statement about their findings as well. The 7 folks don't all know each other. The other 4 people involved sat at the same table in the same restaurant with the same chef and got the same drug results. And so my job as the trial attorney is to find the correlation between the two. I'm not going to point fingers here and now, but I'll tell you this, it's troubling to me that all of this happened at that restaurant on that date at that table. It's my understanding from our investigation that the food was also tested and was tested positive as well. I saw that in a statement as well, I believe from one of the news outlets, that the food was also tested. We know that, and from talking with my client, that they took home a to-go box, and that the investigating officers have tested those to-go boxes. And so with regard to testing the food, we know that it was tested. And so my job and our job in representing our clients is to get to the bottom of what happened, and we will. We trust that law enforcement, all the various governmental agencies are going to do their job. We trust and have the utmost faith that they're going to get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, we intend to send letters of preservation to this restaurant to ask them to preserve all evidence. We want the video. We want to know who all worked that night. We want to know the personnel files. We want to know if there's been any history of drug use. Anybody was terminated that day to try to make a last statement. I mean, we don't know, but we're going to get the answers to those questions. Several people ask, well, hey, are you guys going to file a lawsuit in the case? It's not off the table. But before we ever get into the talk of lawsuits, we want to see if we can get to the bottom of what's going on as far as investigations. Our investigators are on the case. We know that I'm sure this restaurant has retained lawyers. I don't know for certain, but I would suspect that they did, and they're investigating as well to try to find out what happened. We know that 7 folks at that restaurant, 7 customers, tested positive for narcotic. The question is how and why. I don't have the answer to that question, and I'm not going to tell you that some employee did A, B, and C because I don't have that information, but we will get to the bottom of it. With that, questions?
I wanted to ask Mr. Watson, what exactly are your clients seeking as far as compensation, or what exactly are y'all seeking?
For sure. So I'm a personal injury lawyer. When I get involved, we seek financial compensation. We can't undo what was done. Our clients, and I'm going to use the word forced because they did not have an option as to whether or not they wanted to experience methamphetamine. In speaking with my client as a mother to have young kids at home and wonder if you can still take your kids to restaurants anymore because you've lost that trust as to whether or not this is going to happen to you or to your family. There's an emotional component to this as well as physical damages. They've already been to the hospital. They will continue to treat. This is an emotional injury as well as a physical injury. So with regard to the damages being sought, we're going to monitor their medical treatment, monitor how they're progressing in dealing with all of this, and we're going to make sure that they're compensated for emotional pain and suffering. My clients are off work at the present time. Luckily they have employers who are understanding of this incident. You can imagine an employer finding out that an employee has been exposed to something like this. I will tell you this, we are going to be examining Nicos. And some of you may ask, well, what if an employee did this, and what if we find out that that's the case, or that this exposure to narcotics was as a result of their negligence, as a result of their negligent retention of an employee. If we find out that it's a result of negligent training, we're going to be looking at all that, and we're going to be seeking compensation for that as well, if that answers your question.
Do you have an amount?
We don't.
No.
And do you have any paperwork that shows they were tested positive for methamphetamine?
We have their medical records. We do.
Would you be willing to share that with us?
With the permission of my clients. And so I can't tell you right now, but after this press conference, I will speak with them and make sure that they're comfortable with disclosing the actual medical record. Of course, they're okay with talking about it, but giving you their medical record, that's something that we need to talk about off the record.
Now, what sort of contact have you had with the restaurant? How does that work on your end?
So, one thing that if it were up to me, and I tell my clients that, hey, you guys are like family members to me. I get just as upset as if this were to happen to my sister, brother. If I could go over there and with Ryan and I and our investigators to go and talk to their employees and find out what happened, I would. But unfortunately, lawyers aren't allowed to go into establishments or prospective defendants' establishments, people that may be involved in litigation with us. We can't just walk in there and start asking questions. What we can do, and what's happened today, is that letters will go out asking them to preserve all evidence. If any evidence is destroyed, it could warrant a subsequent lawsuit for what's called spoliation of evidence. And so aside from having our investigators, mind you, this is a brand new case to our law firm. Our investigators find out what they can through their channels, and also sending over appropriate letters to the business establishment to preserve evidence, but also to provide us with necessary information that we need to pursue the claim. I was speaking with Ryan earlier today about whether or not we would put this case on the fast track and move forward with litigation, because I'm concerned about the fact that employees may leave, get fired or decide to leave, and they're hard to track, and so it may be better to just file now so we can issue subpoenas and take depositions to preserve that evidence. And so that's something that we're making a decision on now as to whether or not we move with litigation now or wait.
Now, is it too early to determine if this was intentional, if this was just an inadvertent?
It's definitely too early to determine if it was intentional. You know, what we know is you know, we know we have 7 people exposed to narcotics who all sat at the same table at this restaurant. The question is how did the methamphetamines get there? And for me to suggest to you that there was some intent behind it, I'd be giving you a baseless claim, because that's something that we'd have to find out in our investigation.
Obviously, there's under investigation by the sheriff's office over in San Jose County.
Yes.
Has there been good communication between y'all and the sheriff's office as far as keeping y'all informed on the status of the investigation?
So typically, when law enforcement investigates, you think because we have bar licenses that we can just walk in there and say, "Hey, what do you got going on?" But they typically keep us, they will complete their investigation and then give us the results. It's rare to have a law enforcement agency share that type of sensitive information with the attorneys for fear that it may get out and jeopardize their investigation. So, we have not, as of this point, exchanged information with the sheriff's, Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office. But certainly, we welcome it. And I'm sure when there are victims like this, of situations like this, a lot of times they will contact the victims and say, "Hey, just to keep you updated," but they won't share information that could in any way jeopardize the investigation. If that answers your question. Any other questions?
Can we ask the victims questions?
Well, you can, but if you ask it, I will let them know whether or not it's okay to answer it.
More so to speak to their personal experience at the restaurant.
What question did you have?
Well, I just wanted to ask you, Jordan, could you tell me at any point in time while y'all were at the restaurant dining at Nicos when you started to feel something was wrong, or describing to me when you started to sense that, hey, like I just ate something and I don't feel right?
It wasn't until that evening, and we just kind of lost track of time and couldn't sleep. It didn't hit us until well later that evening.
Can you
Go ahead.
Can you be specific on your symptoms that you had?
Yeah, so racing heart, couldn't sleep, and what I realized now was complete paranoia. My daughter, my 9-year-old, has an iPhone, and her location's on there, and I probably checked her location 20-something times while laying in bed. She was with my grandmother. She was where she was supposed to be, but I was even watching, with the iPhone, they have like a 15 to 20 foot where they're off, and so it looked like her little location was bouncing around the outside of my grandmother's house. And of course I was in full panic, like, do I start calling? Like, are you outside? Is she really outside? Or, having to sit there and convince myself that she was in the house and fine. And it's just what I know is that the location's not always completely accurate. Even my location might, my phone's right here, but it might tell me I'm like right outside of the building. So that was one of the bigger things. Was there was definitely an extreme paranoia. I just repeatedly checked and just couldn't sleep no matter how tired I was. I get up at 5 a.m. to go to work, so I got up at 5 a.m. Friday morning, and before we went to dinner I was saying, God, it's getting late, I'm tired, I don't even know if I want to do this at this point. So to not be able to come home and sleep at all was just a very pure exhaustion.
Was that your first time eating at Nicos?
No.
So you all have frequented the restaurant?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And if I could ask you, the restaurant did release a statement. They said they're just heartbroken by this whole situation. What do you make of that?
That wouldn't do it. Any other questions?
Kind of similar to that, but the restaurant did reopen. What was your reaction to seeing that?
But you don't have any response at all in them saying that they felt this was an isolated incident, they aren't aware at all of what could have happened, and that it could have just been one employee?
Yeah, with regard to Nicos, you guys, because this just happened last Friday, I don't want to disparage them because we don't have all the facts. For my client to come and say, oh, we were upset with Nicos without knowing what, if anything, Nicos did, we know how the poisoning, well, we know that they were poisoned and they were exposed to methamphetamine, but, I'm not comfortable with having them speak as it relates to the company or their comments because we need more information. But if the investigation turns out that, if we uncover that, their conduct, their negligence contributed to this, then we could speak to that at that point. And we don't mind doing this again, but, it's a little bit premature to, and you can imagine that they're upset about this. And I don't want those feelings to come out over the air when it's a brand new investigation. So.
I guess this might be a question for the this answer, but I mean, obviously the reaction to this had the whole community concerned about this, what happened, and I guess what's been your personal reaction to seeing the reaction from the community to this whole thing?
Are you directing that to Jordan?
To Jordan or Matt? Or
Okay. I'm fine with you talking about that.
I mean, for the most part, I feel like there's been a lot of support. For the most part, I feel like there's been, a lot of support for us from the community. There's been those one-offs that aren't so supportive. I think it's good that the community knows that they need to be, because like Attorney Watson said, we don't know how this happened. So we don't know, was it a one-time thing? Is it going to happen somewhere else? Or what the situation is. So I just think it's important that everybody is aware and is mindful. I don't know what to, I wish I had an answer of what they could do with that from here. If I did, I would probably sleep a little better at night. But I just think it's good that at least the community is aware of what's going on.
And if you could take me to that moment, if you don't mind, when the doctor came in or whoever with the test results and said you have methamphetamine in your system, what was your instant reaction?
I mean, I was horrified. As a nurse, as, a professional in the community, as a mother, I was terrified. And I guess the whole time, you're sitting there thinking, no way, this is not it. Like, I'm sitting here, we are all just stressed. Maybe it's all of us, we're stressed out. There's got to be some alternate explanation. Never did I think the reason, at that time that I didn't sleep would have been because somebody, poisoned our food. So it was definitely horrifying. I had several mental breakdowns while in the ER and since then.
Ms. Nikko, with the question that he just asked, would you feel comfortable answering that as well?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just when you got the results saying, hey, you had meth in your system, what was your reaction when you got that news?
When I got the news, I was the only person in my room. The nurse walked out nearly immediately. No, everyone was with Jordan because she had the worst symptoms at the time, obviously. My heart rate spiked. I remember seeing the heart rate monitor hit nearly 200. I was horrified of what that meant for my job, for what I skate. That's how I know Jordan and Brandon. And I had no idea when I would be able to get back to that, how it would affect me in the coming days and weeks. And it just scared me because I didn't know where I was going to go from there.
Thank you. One of the things that, in the early conversations with my client that stood out to me that I can't wait to get an answer to is, they kept mentioning that the chef, kept asking them if they want the sweet soy sauce, and that was different from all the other experiences that they've had at this restaurant. The chef asking if they want the sweet soy sauce, and so we'll find out what he meant by that. What is the sweet soy sauce, and why wasn't that offered to them in prior occasions with the restaurant? So that's one of the things we're going to be looking into is how this could have happened at one of our public establishments here locally. So all right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, before you guys go, could you say and spell your names into the microphone?
For sure. Okay. Hey, you want to start with your name?
Jordan Gray, JordanGray.
Aaron Watson, AARONWATSON.
Ryan Stoner, RYANSTONER.
Matthew Gilley, MATHEWGILLEY.
And the other client that we represent is Brandon, BRANDON, Gray, GRAY. Okay? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.